the tagline which you mentioned is you cannot secure what you cannot see. So it was from my last article which I published about API discovery. I would say it's 100% correct, because to improve anything, the best and the first step is to get its overview. So without a clear understanding of your API landscape, you are just tackling around or operating with the blind spots. So it's like leaving your organization and not leveraging the current aspects which are available in the market as well, maybe the tools or the technologies which are already there. So you are just leaving your organization and inviting unknown risk and threats. So it's like just not paying more attention. And the numbers which you mentioned, like a 10% organization or maybe 20, I would say, fully document their APIs. So that is also true, by the way.
Welcome to the Elephant in AppSec, the podcast to explore, challenge, and boldly face the AppSec elephants in the room. I'm Alexandra, your host and AppSec enthusiast and growth manager at Escape, an API discovery and security platform. Today, I'm excited to welcome Akansha Shukla, a cybersecurity expert with over 10 years of experience, currently specializing in API security at ABN AMRO, one of the largest banks in the Netherlands. Akansha has a strong background in application security, DevSecOps, threat modeling, and vulnerability assessments. Beyond her work at the bank, Akansha enjoys sharing her knowledge and runs her own blog focused on API security. She is also a notable contributor to platforms like Nordic APIs. And of course, don't miss her session at the upcoming API Days event in Paris. Quick special announcement for the Elephant in AppSec. In November, we're hosting the first Elephant in AppSec virtual conference. Join us and hear from speakers who aren't afraid to share their strong opinions. But now, back to this episode. In this episode, we discuss why lots of organizations are still struggling to develop a clear vision and roadmap for API governance, why collaboration between security experts and API management teams is crucial for effective API security, and how regulations influence API security roadmap, and much more. If you're curious about how to start sharing your expertise and want to learn from someone who has done it successfully, this episode is for you. Dive right in.
So, hi, Akansha. I'm super excited to have you on the podcast with me today. I'm really glad that you've joined, and I'm very happy to talk about the topic of API security, because it's very close to me as well. Like, I've organized also webinars on this topic, and I'm just very curious to learn more about your experience, especially in the financial sector. Like, it's one of the big topics, the API discovery. Right now, everyone kind of trying to find out what they actually need to secure first, and sometimes it can be a bit challenging as well. And especially like what I think a couple of months ago, we actually I organized a webinar on this topic with one of the editors-in-chiefs of Nordic APIs book. I don't know if you know Bill Dorfel and Eric Wilder, the Open AI ambassador at the Open AI initiative. So we kind of discuss those challenges, discuss the challenges of API governance, API sprawl, and I think only with the metrics that I think Bill mentioned, it was only 10% of the organizations actually fully document their APIs, which is a very small number. It was and you can't really secure what you can't see, and 10%,
Yes,
it's so much potential. What do you think, about those numbers? Do you think they're true?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I would like to thank you for having me here. And the tagline which you mentioned is you cannot secure what you cannot see. So it was from my last article which I published about API discovery. So I would say it's 100% correct. Because to improve anything, the best and the first step is to get its overview. So without a clear understanding of your API landscape, you are just tackling around or operating with the blind spots. So it's like leaving your organization and not leveraging the current aspects which are available in the market as well, maybe the tools or the technologies which are already there. So you are just leaving your organization and inviting unknown risk and threats. So it's like just not paying more attention.
Mhm.
And the numbers which you mentioned, like a 10% organization or maybe 20, I would say, fully document their API. So that is also true, by the way. But I would say it's a concerning topic, but it's not surprising. And everyone can say, yes, this is known to their organization, their management, their leaderships, etc. So strong API governance, when we say it's like critical for secure, compliant, and maybe consumable APIs. Unfortunately, many organizations haven't fully embraced it, so they do not know how to make it more efficient API, or create API governance. So I would say that it's like because it's when we say API governance, they still lack inconsistent designing, versioning, maybe access control policies. So governance is like collaborative, and it concludes everything, the entire overview of API security. But I would say the good news is that at least financial sectors, and majorly banking sectors, they are implementing and proactively regulating these measures, and trying to adapt, and they are realizing basically the importance of API governance, and trying to implement as much as possible in their organizations.
And what do you think is kind of stopping, other organizations to actually get this clear view on what API governance is and why it's important, and try to develop, a vision and roadmap for that?
They do understand. I'm not saying they don't understand, but it's something like when you have your business priorities. So it's something they do prioritize their business rapid development cycles, and this sometimes overshadows security concerns. So they do know that what they need to come up with the API governance, but because of their business requirements, they just cannot prioritize at certain point of time and a certain moment. So it's known to everyone, I would say, like every person, irrespective of their job role, irrespective of if they are developing any API, designing API, securing API, whatever they are doing, they all are aware of how important API governance and documenting these aspects.
And I think you also mentioned like collaboration is kind of collaborative
Yeah.
effort, right? How do you push internally within the organization to actually collaborate on this topic?
So when we say like collaborating, so it's like it's not an individual task. Like
Mm.
one person cannot just fully do it. Like if I say I'm a
Yeah.
security expert, so I can just secure everything. I can, because I'm not developing API, so I don't know. I don't have the clear vision of the functionality, clear vision what exactly the API is doing. So I can just come up with the my expertise of threats, vulnerabilities, risk, etc. While API management team, they know that how API functions, and what kind of aspect they have, what kind of methods they are using, what kind of headers they are using, etc. So these, I'm going more deeper into technical aspects.
Yeah.
So basically, when we say that API management team, API security team, or whatever, it's a collaborative measure, and it's not a one person's job. So it's always like and these aspects are covered in like shifting left, if I shift left. So it is also like we as a security experts can advise you, can give you how you can implement security measures, or maybe just like a manual approach of like small test cases, like implementing like CORS, cross origin resource sharing headers. These are the simple, or maybe not using any kind of wildcard in your headers, or maybe not using any personally identified information. So these are the aspects which we think that these are critical aspects. But like again, coming back to API development team who are implementing those aspects, they can just think about, yeah, if this is the best practice, we can implement from the scratch. So shifting left, when they are developing the code, when they are writing the piece of code, they can have this kind of mindset that yes, we do have to implement certain kind of checks at the start.
Yeah. I mean, they can have, but they do not always have.
Yes, yes, that's why we are here.
Yeah. Yeah. How did you actually like get to into API security? Because you also now write, yeah, you have a blog about it, and what makes you passionate about it?
So I would say after years of working, now it's been decade when I'm in cybersecurity. So I work for like many topics like vulnerability assessment, pen testing, source code analysis, code review, threat modeling as well. So uh, I saw like firsthand how APIs are becoming prime target of these attackers. So if I read a lot about new attacks, new things. So
Mm.
the past year, if I'm not sure if you saw the news that in the Facebook there was a view as functionality, and the whole
Mm-hmm.
it was got triggered by attacker, and Mark Zuckerberg, everyone knows him, so he has to
Yeah.
pay a lot of money for that, because almost millions of people, they just lost their personally identified information, their name, their date of birth, etc.
Mm.
So I saw that many attacks are coming up with respect to API. So I wanted to delve deeper into this critical area, and then I started reading books, and then I want to challenge myself
Mm.
as well. So I
Yeah.
started writing blogs over Medium, and I think I published almost 6 blogs
Mm.
last
Congratulations.
year. Thank you. About the discovery. So yeah, and it also helps many organizations. They can, because I got many compliments from like few of the leaders who, like, no name if I
Mm.
could call. So he mentioned that it was the first article where he could see the business aspects are merged together with the threats. So if
Yeah.
I see my first article, it was mainly dedicated towards like how you see business layers of any implementation, anything in the application, and then covering all the aspects of security related to APIs. So it was yeah, and I think
Mm.
this will also enhance my knowledge and help organizations to build a strong defense, maybe.
Yeah, so I mean, I will definitely put like the link to the blog under the podcast. I think it's very interesting. It's very useful also for the security people to understand how to connect not only like the vulnerabilities for the developers, but also how to connect this first to the business problems, because at the end, it's all about solving business problems and I think bringing more revenue to the business, at least if you want to implement, a new initiative. Like, how would you tie, the API security? For example, how would you explain it to someone, let's say on a higher level, the importance of it? What wording or what, arguments would you use?
Yeah, so API security is not like a one day job. It's like an
Yeah.
ongoing journey, and it's not a one man can implement everything. So again, it's like a collaborative measure, which I already mentioned. But when we have to convince our leadership, so first thing is like prioritizing API security. That is the main lacking area which we feel like we are not prioritizing establishing like a roadmap for API security, which can cover. So at this moment, many organizations have individual aspects, I should say, like they have hardening in place, maybe they have a real-time protection, they have a integrated tool in the pipeline which can discover code related vulnerabilities in the repositories. So these aspects are individually there in many organizations, but when we talk about like a roadmap, so it starts from discovering, like it starts knowing your universe, how many APIs you have, what kind of a specification, and then ending with the like maybe governance, or getting the overview of all the policies and all the implemented measures, whatever you did security. So convincing leadership, I should say, it's like make them understand why it is priority at this moment, because we have like every day we are developing thousands of APIs. If you talk with any of the developer, they are relying on APIs. Like if you have to talk in application from back end to front end, they use API. If for authentication, they use API. For any like if you just experience your own day-to-day activity, you use Uber map, which directs to Google. That is a how it triggers your location. So how it is doing, from Uber it is redirecting to Google Maps. Why? Because it is using API. So everywhere it's API, bankings, your food applications, all those. So when you are having these APIs, how secure they are, whether they are using your maybe personal identified information or maybe some other aspect. So they need to understand that business aspects are important, but if you don't have security measures, some or the other day you will be, or you are just inviting some kind of risk, and you are giving open platform to all attackers. And
Yeah.
yeah, so it's like that. So they need to, like, leadership need to understand why they need to prioritize and develop a robust and comprehensive roadmap for API security.
Mm. And do you think like analysts' reports sometimes help with that? Like I know 1 month ago, Gartner published their report on market analysis for API
Yeah.
security, where they kind of talked about both API security kind of posture management
Mm-hmm.
and real-time protection. So they divided it in kind of separate categories. Like, do you think, is it something that you also show sometimes, or is it important for you actually as a practitioner and within the organization? Or
Uh,
it's just no.
it's good to divide these aspects, like in individual groups, but again, they need to work together. Like if you divide
Mm.
like, some aspects of like Gartner did, because API security specifically is about maintaining up to date, and like if you are changing your functionality and in you are not updating or documenting them, and not documenting the specification which you are changing, then it can it is of no use basically.
Mm.
I would say I agree to that, that dividing these aspects, and it is sometimes annoying for analysts and developers
Yeah.
to just read these kind of documents and practically implement it. But yeah, for me as a security expert, I think it is a good approach, with some exceptions, I should say.
Okay. What exceptions?
When I say exceptions, it's like you need to come up with your own roadmap. So every organization, like financial, has different aspects. Banking, whosoever is developing any kind of product, they have different aspects. So depending on what kind of organizational aspects you have, you need to come up with your own exceptions. I can give you hundreds of example of those
Yeah.
exceptions, which will
I mean,
cover.
if you can blend it with yeah, some, it could be very interesting to know, what the exceptions that exist.
Yeah, like when I say exceptions, like some organization give more focus towards hardening or real-time protection, some give more focus towards discovery, because they want to know how many shadow APIs are there, how many, because APIs are something which we are building since ages, like I think 2008 or something, around when APIs came into picture.
Yeah.
But now it's been 2024 and we don't have any roadmap of API security, which is like a really concerning topic. So when I say I think you pick a right word, exception. So
Yeah.
for us, like being in a banking sector, I think at this moment we are more prioritizing API discovery, just to know the landscape of API security, rather than implementing any tool or automating. These are the important aspects, I agree to that. But without knowing your universe, how can you say that? Like, I again come to the my tagline of where we started, like you cannot secure which you cannot see. So if you don't
Yeah.
know what you are securing, then what you are securing.
Yeah.
So I I think
You can't build anything on the top of.
exactly. So
Yeah.
this, for us, like I should say this is the exception, because at this moment we are prioritizing more towards API discovery, API inventory, rather than implementing test cases and hardening real-time protection. These are all
Mm.
already in the roadmap, but not on the priority list.
Okay. And do you think the API discovery actually now is one of the important topics in banking because of PCI DSS 4.0, or it did not influence at all? I
Uh,
think it has. there was like a part, I think, new part on inventory management and governance. I think there was a new requirement to actually like maintain inventory of all the software, and it has to be effective by March next year. So do you think, is that one of the reasons why at least more organizations think about that?
I would say, first of all, I would like to thank these kind of regulations are coming into picture to help organizations understanding how what they are inviting and in which situation they are. So API when you see PCI DSS or maybe some other other very, like, I cannot recall all the regulations, but there are several others. So these are playing as a crucial catalyst role for change. So they previously, I would say, when these regulations were not there, organizations, they provide some kind of clear standards, guidelines, which could be taken as a recommendation, not the mandatory aspects to implement. And when these regulations, which you mentioned, like PCID says, when these comes into picture, it is hard and fast rule to implement these kind of regulations. So it is not just a recommendation, or it is not a BAU which you can just optionally choose. So
Yeah.
of course, these are very good initiatives and very good opportunities for organization to take into consideration, because if they do not comply to these things, then it would be a huge problem for them. So I would say, and specifically for API, so yes, I think more regulations should come into picture to make organization more compliance towards these topics. And the increased, because when I say why it is important for API security, because the increased API development, like every day thousands of APIs are being developed. So if you are not complying to these regulations, just you are not securing enough. So these are like a baseline, these are like a checks for you to
Yeah.
comply with when you are developing any APIs for your organizations. Yeah.
And so these are the checks, and then you have to build it. You have to kind of customize, I guess, the roadmap after for your specific needs, depending on how internally the organization is structured, and how everything is built. I think in one of your articles, you also mentioned on API discovery that the best way to do that is for monitoring network traffic. Like, why? I think at least the feedback that I've heard a lot, like at B-Sides and at RSA last May, like a lot of people were saying it's kind of, they were frustrated with the traffic-based solutions because it can take like weeks or months to deploy. And you don't, if it's like outside of API gateway or WAF or proxy, it's also then this APIs you can't discover. Like, why do you think it is the best solution?
First of all, thank you for reading my blogs.
Yes.
So it's a very good point. And
Yeah.
yes, I did mention that network traffic monitoring is the powerful technique. And I totally agree that it could be annoying for developers who think that it is little bit challenging for them to implement this kind of technique. But what I think and I believe that it provides a real-time view. So when you
Okay.
monitor the traffic, it gives you real time view of your API activity, basically how your APIs are how your APIs are acting. And it also gives you the overview how APIs are implemented in your environment, how they are deployed. Also, while dedicated, like if you take any tools, if you don't go with this approach and then just go through with the dedicated tool, they will definitely offer valuable features which you can say that they will help you identifying many kind of vulnerabilities in the APIs. But I believe that starting with monitoring your networks gives you the most comprehensive baseline understanding of your API landscape. It also reveals any kind of shadow API transaction, like if in your API which you haven't documented and it is there in the network flow, then you can definitely know what kind of API is this. Is it documented? It is specified somewhere? Do we have registered it is somewhere centralized or something? So basically, why I'm also like since 10 years I'm working in this field. So why
Mm.
I think that monitoring a network gives you the realistic overview of your API and the flow, how it is going in the current stage. It's not a hypothetical situation that okay, we do have thousands of APIs where we can just integrate some tool and then do the scanning. When you monitor your network aspects, how APIs are how many APIs are passed through internal API gateway, how many APIs are there which are passed through external API gateway, which are passed just like last time I think in the Gartner's report only there was identified that in an organization they do not know how many private API. When I say private, it's like for internal use. How many
Internal, yeah.
private
Mm.
APIs are there in the organization? So they do not
Mm.
have clear overview because they are not monitoring their network. They do not know how many APIs are passed through the internal API gateway, or maybe whatever gateway they have. So for my understanding, it's good to monitor the traffic and get the real overview of these API rather than
Mm.
just and I'm not saying that implementing any tool is a wrong approach. It is approach. What I feel that monitoring your network gives you space of implementing API security,
Okay.
specifically API.
So,
Yeah.
okay, so specifically for like a real-time protection and real-time monitoring, for example, because there are different tools, like even I know, yeah, for the tools that scan like exposed source code, for example, they're able to also discover external APIs that do not pass through API gateway. In this case, you think it's, for example, less important to discover those shadow APIs that can be, for example, endpoint be exposed online? Because, for example, I know when I've done this mistake myself and we discovered myself like some marketing points. So it was not anything like very vulnerable, but I know that it can happen. Even if there is no constant traffic
Mhm.
going through that, it can still be vulnerable. Do you think in this case you're okay to accept this risk to miss those types of exposed endpoints by developers? Because
I
usually, like, if,
yeah, I think so. In this scenario, maybe we can miss some of the vulnerabilities, but yeah, I need to think about it, I think.
okay, yeah, it's. I think that's probably the toughest part of this. What when I talked with the different like API security,
Mhm.
our professionals as well. That's the toughest part on the market because it's also not something you always like think about, especially yes, used not only like by developers but other departments as well, which kind
Yeah.
of don't have the same security background or the same like security training. Sometimes like you have to you train, for example, to get SOC 2 certification, but you
Mhm.
don't have the same reflexes.
Yeah.
Sometimes as well, depending like on the deployment of the company. What do you think is apart, from API? Like when you discover APIs, what kind of information you
Mhm.
think is actually vital for the business? Because at the beginning of the podcast, we kind of discussed the importance, of API security for the business. Like, what do you think is the information that could be very interesting for you and for the business stakeholders?
You mean like when we discover any API, what could be the
Mm.
information we can get
Yeah,
as a
yeah.
so I think API specification is a really
Mm.
important aspect because it gives you all information about version, about name, like when it is released, like release date,
Mm.
protocols, encryption, description, everything it had, or what kind of method has been used in this API. So I think when we document any API, it gives you all kind of information about the API, and then also it also helps that to the developers rather than recreating a new API, they can just go and see if that is already in place in the document, and they can reuse it. So it also helps in reducing duplication of API development process. And it also I would say it also provide an overview including all these applications which often do not cover in all existing APIs. So like suppose if you develop any API and you do not specify these kind of information, it would be difficult for anyone like us, like a security experts, to understand what is the use of this API. So when we say after discovering all the API, registered it in a centralized overview with all the specification mentioning versions, and it also helps developers if they come up with the, suppose if they have to do a minute change in one of the functionality
Yeah.
of a particular API, so they can just go and change and come up with a new version. So it will give you the step-by-step overview of this was the version 1, 2, 3, whatsoever. So it also helps us understand when this API were changed, what was the release date, etc. So these are the
Okay.
specifications that are really important for everyone, irrespective of
Mm.
their job role, maybe
Mm.
developers, security experts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about developers who are sometimes lazy or can forget to update specifications? I
I
think,
it can create a huge problem, because if they do not update it, if you implement any tool, then also you need to update all the time. It needs modification, because you are triggering the scans all the time in the
yeah.
CI/CD pipeline, maybe, or in the scanning your repositories for code scanning. So all these aspects need, so they can't be lazy, they cannot give this excuse that, hey,
I mean,
I, I
it's
don't
human, you know. It's
I,
sometimes humans forget.
I, for this purpose we really need a strict and regulation for these kind of developers, that hey, you cannot come up with these excuse
Yeah.
that you don't want to change and come up with the new version of specification.
Okay, yeah. But what if there will be like a tool that, just updates hubs to once you have it actually inventory, and then it just generates, an update specifications automatically? So
uh,
developers do not have, to actually do it themselves all the time. So it saves a kind of time for them, especially if they're forced, to deploy very quick. We discussed like shift left before, so they kind of actually have to deploy all the time, and security is integrated right at the beginning. But what if it's the same kind of thing about secured like shifts kind of everywhere in a sense, even if they're deploying, there is still on the other side the specifications that just get updated through scanning or automatic stack generations and things like that.
Uh, yeah, I think I agree to this point that automating a specification, generating and integrating it to somewhere through a existing development process can help them. So it is like reducing the manual task of registering somewhere manually and updating the version. It's totally, I completely agree. And I think to address this challenge, maybe we can leverage AI technologies, like
Yeah.
because AI in the coming age, it's like a future of all the aspects. If I say security, if I say development, everywhere
Yeah.
AI is going to come into picture. So I think we can leverage that to automate these specification generator, keep the documentation up to date, so developers they can be lazy.
So they can be, they can work on other things.
Yeah.
They can be lazy with the specifications.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit easier
Yeah.
for them. And how do you think the AI and what kind of other parts of API security, something like, how do you think it will actually, how it will impact API security in general?
So AI is like everywhere. You are using AI for writing the letter, for writing the mail. So it's everywhere. So when I say API security, I think AI is going to be play a vital role in this, because if you have to do threat modeling corresponding to API, I think my next blog would be about that how to do specifically threat modeling about API security, because when we say threat modeling, it's only covers the application aspects. It's difficult for us to create a picture in our head about API related threats. So in the
Yeah.
design phase, first in the design phase, so I think AI is going to help us in generating and reducing these kind of problems, and also like fuzzing, maybe real time protection, hardening. All these aspects can be taken care by artificial intelligence and automated tools in the future.
Yeah, so maybe like from the design phase, I don't know, that the developer have a bot how to develop a secure
Right.
API guidelines that you can implement for your organization, so they can actually use it as a training
Yeah.
from the beginning when they join. Do you think it should be enforced when someone joins the organization and works, on building the API, that there is some kind of training on security and onboarding?
I think for training, I should say it's not related to API or something. It should be there in place as a mandate for each individual teams, depending on developing team, operational team, management team, because they need to understand why we are emphasizing on security in each stage, like from designing. So when they are designing, they need to understand how they are authenticating, how they are, whether they are authorizing or not, what kind of encryption is there. All these aspects they can think from the very first stage when they are designing anything, irrespective of API or whatever. So definitely I should say that awareness and training is something that should be mandatory, implemented in all the organizations.
Did you implement any trainings for
Yes.
yes?
So at this moment, for API, we are implemented a kind of a guardrail in which we are just trying to make developers understand that whether they have to come up with all the checks, then only they can say that they are compliant for API security. So it's like a small step towards API security. It's not like yes, we reached the destination. It's like
Yeah.
on journey. So I think developing certain kind of checks, mandatory checks, I would say, not just a recommendation, because when you write a piece of note saying that it's a guideline or it's a recommendation, nobody to be honest, nobody
Yeah,
cares.
if it's just nice to have, no one listens. No.
Okay, give me a document, I'll read it in my sleeping hours, and then it's okay. But when you make certain checks mandatory for developers, it's and then they understand the security. So I think every organization should come up with some kind of guardrails or some kind of checks which could help them in implementing API security, application security, code security, or whatever they are trying to do. So, specifically about API security, I think coming up with the manual test cases is the best approach to start with. Like suppose developer are they just writing some certain code, so if they know that yes, these are the aspect, what kind of method they can use, so whether to use get, whether to use post, not do not pass any kind of sensitive information, indirect or direct identifiers, all kind of things, all they can understand from the scratch when they are just building any kind of API functionality. So I think it is good to have from scratch and make them do it mandatory.
Yeah. And you can set every time you publish an article in your blog, you can set it and force them to read it, so they stay like,
That would be my next.
actually, yeah, updated, with everything, and because they know about your pain points too, because it can sometimes open the dialogue. At least if each part, if it's not only like you're trying to understand how you can make their life better, but they're also trying to understand how make your life better from the in easier from the security perspective. They also asked all of them the question at the end of the podcast. If you would have to give an advice for someone, for security person who just has to if you're starting API security, they just need to learn more about it. What would you recommend them to learn about, the steps to take to actually understand it better and fight for building a roadmap in their organization?
I think I can share my experience, what I did. I was in security for like it's been almost 10 years now. But for API security, I read a book which is API Security in Action. I'm not sure if you heard
Mm-hmm.
about it. It's from Neil Medin.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay, no, no, this one.
yeah, it's a very nice book, and if someone who is new to API security, they can just start with this book. It gives a practical guide of implementation, how to secure your APIs. It also covers key topics like authentication, authorization, auth, like basic steps. What are the important and crucial for API security, like input validation, sanitization, all these are covered. Also the threat modeling. So it is very nice book, which I can recommend, and definitely read my blogs. So that
Yeah,
is another good
that's the goal. Yeah.
can do. You can follow me over Medium, so you'll be updated by all the new blogs. And what I can share with my experience, because for this topic, almost it's been 2 years now when I started API security. So I would say it's like an ongoing journey. It's not like just reaching out to some destination, because today AI is there. So many other things are there, so you need to keep yourself up to date. So the piece of advice which I can give is just stay vigilant, adapt to new technologies, adapt, evolving your threat landscape, and definitely keep doing the learning, never stop, and come up
Yeah.
with your own roadmap depending on your organization.
Okay, how, for example, do you keep on learning? Let's say, do you usually, you mentioned you read the news about the threats. Are
Yeah.
there any blogs apart from yours that you could recommend, or newsletters maybe, or I don't know, do you read like Bleeping Computer or
So Hack the One is a good one. So
hmm,
you can have a look on that. Also, Hackers News. So all these platforms which keeps you updated. All day to day threats coming into picture. So, and if you also read a little bit about cybersecurity, upcoming hacks, or not upcoming hacks, like upcoming innovations, tools, and new hacks. So all these are available in the Hack the One or Hacker News. So you can just go
okay.
through these sites. They are very informative.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your opinions and your expertise and learnings with the listeners. It was very fun conversation, and I challenged you a little bit at about the network type
Yeah,
tools. So yes,
I think I can give you answer maybe next time. So
you take your time. Take your time. No
yeah,
worries.
thank you so
Yeah,
much for having me here. It also gives me brushing up all your thoughts and all your expertise, what you can do, and of course, I love to accept new challenges. So thank you so much for that. I hope this is helpful for audience. Yeah,
of course. Thank you. Thank you so
thank you
much.
so much.